Welcome to But Jesus Drank Wine.
And other stories that kept us stuck. I'm Mead.
And I'm Christy.
And in this podcast, we'll explore the stories that kept us, stuck, wanting to drink and not wanting to drink all at the same time.
Join us as we show you that freedom from alcohol does not have to mean a life sentence of misery and missing out,
but actually means living an authentic life full of peace, joy, and purpose.
Hello, my beautiful friend, Christy here. We have a really exciting two-part episode for you gals this week. But before we get into today's conversation, I just wanted to give you a really exciting update about what's been going on in our community. This last month of May, we had Mead's Pastor David Walters, come in and give a beautiful masterclass on marriage and sobriety and finding who you are and what your purpose is in Christ and how that helps in our marriages and how seeing us in relation to what God has for us and how God sees us and how God sees our husbands. And he just did such a beautiful job. And the feedback on that masterclass has just been so encouraging. You have access to watch that masterclass in the recorded masterclasses space. And then for our upcoming next masterclass on June 3rd, we're welcoming our friend Christopher Cook, who wrote the wonderful book, Healing What You Can't Erase. He's been on the podcast before, and I often share his Substack articles in the community, and the women in there have just kept responding on how encouraging and helpful he is. And so we are asking him to come and talk to us. So he's going to be by on June 3rd. The class is going to be called The Power of Yet, Building Growth Mindset for Unbreakable Resilience. And so that's going to be a really good one. And again, it will be recorded for our community members. And then this is super exciting. We've been listening and gathering so much feedback on how you gals want to connect. And so we've actually added 2 additional really exciting connection calls. So now we have a total of 3 types of connection calls. First, we have Gather and Grow, which is for anybody in the community, and that's hosted by Mead and I. And then we have added, because we've heard so much from women that are already alcohol-free, but still are really desperate for community and just getting in a room with other women that are alcohol-free. And so we have added the Uncorked and Unshaken connection calls with 2 of our incredible leadership team members. And then in addition to that, we recently met as a leadership team to pray over our community and our community members, mostly by name, because we just love you all so much and get to know your stories and what's going on with you. And during that prayer call, Mead and I decided we need to bring more prayer into this community, and we want to begin praying for you live. And so we have 2 of our incredible leadership team members leading a monthly praise and prayer call. There is so much inside. If you haven't already joined us, so many of you have, and it's just such a pleasure and honor and blessing to get to know you each and every week, each and every day. But if you haven't joined us, there's obviously a link in the show notes for that. Okay, let us move on to today's special episodes. Dr. Lee Warren, you probably hear us speak about him all the time because he is one of our friends and our mentors. And so the following 2 episodes were released on Dr. Lee Warren's Spiritual Self-Brain Surgery podcast, which we got to guest host for him. And we wanted to make sure that everyone heard this because the 10 commandments of self-brain surgery have been so instrumental in the way that we coach women to freedom from alcohol. And so we also wanted to share them here. In these episodes, Mead and I are going to dive deep into the intersection of neuroscience and faith as we discuss Dr. Lee's 10 commandments of self-brain surgery. We're going to focus this week on the first 5. We're going to explore how changing our thought patterns can truly transform our behavior, especially when it comes to the over-drinking cycle. We're going to talk about the importance of curiosity, self-compassion, and the crucial distinction between the mind and the brain when it comes to achieving these lasting changes. We're going to draw from our own personal stories like we do all the time, but even more importantly, biblical truths. We're going to guide you through actionable steps to bring transformation using these incredible tools from Dr. Lee Warren. So these are the first 5 commandments. Next week, we're going to release the second 6 through 10. And so we really hope you enjoy this. This was a really fun one for us to record. It means so much to us. I have the 10 commandments on a sticky note on my computer, and I just look at them all the time. They have been so helpful for me in my personal life. And so I really, really encourage you gals to give them a listen. We know so many members in our community who have listened to these commandments and re-listened to them. They have them on their own sticky notes and posted in their life because they're just so important. So without further ado, here is our first episode of our guest hosting of the Spiritual Self Brain Surgery podcast. And here's our conversation. When life gets hard, does what we think we believe hold us up, or does it crumble under the weight of doubt? Hi, I'm Christy, and I'm one half of the But Jesus Drank Wine podcast, and I'm here with my co-pilot, Mead Shirley. We are so grateful that our friend Dr. Lee Warren invited us to co-host 2 episodes of Spiritual Brain Surgery.
This is the podcast where we take a hard look at what we believe, why we believe it, and how neuroscience and faith smash together to help us find the hope to withstand anything life throws at us. You've got questions, and we're going to do the hard work to find the answers. But you can't change your life until you change your mind. It's going to take some spiritual brain surgery to get it done. So let's get after it.
Hi, guys. So we are Christy and Mead from the But Jesus Drank Wine podcast and community. And this is Christy here. I'll just introduce myself really quickly. So I found Dr. Lee because we share a publisher. We're both published with Waterbrook, which is so amazing. It's the Christian imprint of Penguin Random House. And so we shared a publisher, a publicist. And the second that I found out about his work, I freaked out because I love it when the Bible is, like Dr. Lee says, smashing together with the neuroscience and supporting one another so that we can change the way that we think in order to change the way that we behave, and we can feel better. And so his book, Hope is the First Dose, if you haven't read it, if you're a listener of his podcast, you probably have, but if you haven't, you have to read it. It's so good. Dr. Lee's been such a big supporter of my book, Love Life Sober, a 40-day alcohol fast, and a huge supporter of our podcast and our community. And we're just so happy to be here. I live in the UK. I live in Sussex, but I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. What about you, Mead?
I'm Mead. I'm here outside of Atlanta, and I live here with my family. And when we met through coaching certification, we just instantly hit it off and became super passionate about bringing awareness and attention to this gray area drinking, the kind of drinking that I was doing, that Christy was doing, where from the outside looking in, there wasn't a problem. My drinking didn't look any different than anybody else's. In fact, I would say in most cases, I was on the lesser side than a lot of my social group. And yet I still felt this tension, this stuckness around it. Like I wanted to drink alcohol. We weren't rock bottom drinkers. We weren't, not to say we couldn't have gotten to that place, but I think it's important to note that we're talking about alcohol use disorder that exists on a spectrum versus the traditional conversation around what we think maybe a problem drinker in a traditional sense would be, where there's a rock bottom involved. So through this life-changing work that we found, we connected and have just had the best time doing the podcast and leading in this community where we get to actually have conversations about Jesus. Isn't it funny how in a lot of sobriety spaces, like you can talk about spirituality in a number of any other way except for in the Jesus way. So it's been super cool to see how the Lord keeps just guiding us towards expanding the circle, expanding this conversation, and inviting these women into what life could look like when you're free from alcohol and pursuing a deeper, closer connection to Jesus.
Yeah, I love that so much. We're so lucky.
So Christy and I met, and
it was love at first sight.
It really was. And she had this crazy idea to start a podcast. And I'm like, no, really? And she's like, yes. Then we started a podcast, and it was just recording the conversations about the things that there was no information about gray area drinking and Jesus when we were stuck in the drinking cycle. And that's what we love to talk about. And that's been so hugely important to bring to the sobriety space, that we can actually do this with Jesus, because if we're not doing it with Jesus, then we're not finding total freedom, right? So when we launched that podcast a couple of years ago, having these conversations about the two things, then at a certain point, the Lord was like, hey, also include the bigger circle of listeners here. And
Yeah.
we launched our community.
Well, we
It is
started
now,
getting, I mean, the Lord was prompting us too, but remember we got those beautiful emails from, and no,
oh, yeah.
started to get like hearing back from the podcast listeners about how can we hang out with you basically. We need to be in a like a Zoom room with you. It was so, so cool because off the back of those emails, we got to open this community.
Yeah, the way that we approach freedom from alcohol is different in that we are approaching it from a place of just the abundant grace and compassion offered to us through Jesus first with the foundation to then get curious about the stories that keep us stuck. We talk about how our thinking changes our drinking. What we're doing is identifying those stories that we tell ourselves that have us believing that there is some reward to drinking alcohol, some benefit to our lives. Yet when we're stuck in the drinking cycle, we find ourselves in a place where we have that conflict of like, I feel like alcohol is helping me here. And also I know that alcohol is not helping me here. And so the But Jesus Drank Wine way is to look at it first from that place of just the grace and the compassion that comes from Jesus. And then with curiosity, start to explore those stories that keep us stuck. And then holding that up to the truth, the actual capital T truth in the Bible, and then the truth through neuroscience and the truth about what alcohol does to our brains and bodies, how it really affects us. So it's a different approach. There's some other things out there like it, but not where it's smashed together the way that Dr. Lee likes to do it too.
Yeah, that's so, so good, babe. I love that. It's so good. So, what we are going to do with you over the next two episodes is we are going to go through each of Dr. Lee's 10 commandments, and we are going to let you know how we use it in our own community and coaching practices. And then we're going to end every commandment with a tiny new action, a tiny Tina, which is how we end every single one of our podcast episodes. It's also how I've wrapped up every single one of the chapters in my book, and it will give you a tiny new action, something small to take away from this. And if you've heard Dr. Lee's 10 commandments before, many of you probably have them even memorized, but we're hoping to give you a fresh spin on what this is like when you are a gal who is stuck in the overdrinking cycle. All right, let's get after it. The first commandment is I must relentlessly refuse to participate in my own demise. Oh gosh, this is such a good one, don't you think, babe?
Yes, it's so good. But it's easy to look at this and say, okay, so obviously this means we stop drinking alcohol. We know that alcohol is, and maybe you don't know, but now you do. It is a class one neurotoxin. It's a class one carcinogen. Alcohol is not good for you. And drinking it is a way of maybe participating in your own demise. But the way that we like to approach this kind of the way that we do it in the But Jesus Drank Wine world is through a lens of compassion and curiosity first. Because if we try really hard just to stop drinking, it almost makes it doubly hard to find freedom from it. We've got to change our thinking first. And so we'd love to look at this from the lens of if you are in a place of condemning yourself for being stuck with alcohol, by the way, it is not your fault. It's an addictive substance. So even if you use it moderately, the more you drink it, the more your body is going to want it and crave it. Even if you're in that place, the fact that you're stuck with alcohol is not your fault. So stop beating yourself up for being stuck with it. The longer you beat yourself up for it, the more you stay stuck. So once we offer ourselves that compassion, once we accept the compassion that Jesus gives us, then we can turn to curiosity and start looking for those stories that actually are keeping us conflicted, thinking that there is some benefit to drinking. And I think that is a really, we know that's how, I mean, this is the method that we use for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. But if we just start with that from that place of, okay, I'm just not going to drink, then we're relying on the willpower and the white knuckling, and we're relying on things that eventually run out and don't create that lasting change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. That's so, so good, babe. And I think about myself when I think the other way that he says this commandment is you must not commit self
Mhm.
malpractice. And so I just want to speak to the gals that maybe don't think this is self malpractice yet, because for me, I thought that alcohol was giving me, and dear listeners, a lot of these overlap. So if we repeat ourselves, we're sorry, but a lot of these overlap. But I thought that alcohol was giving me so many things and I didn't realize that it was malpractice. I didn't realize that I was actually contributing to my own kind of self demise. And so to go back to what Mead was saying, that's why the curiosity is so important. And if you're sitting there and you're listening and you're wondering, Is my nightly wine a self malpractice? Am I contributing to my own demise? Well, first of all, I would say if the Holy Spirit is nudging you, then it's probably a yes. But one of the ways that I think is good to gauge this, and I talk about this, I think it's in day 3 of my 40-day fast, is instead of waiting for a rock bottom, instead of waiting for your drinking to get worse, see how it's affecting the fruit of the spirit. See how it's affecting your joy. See how it's affecting your peace and your patience. If it's affecting those things, then it might be worth taking a break and figuring out if you can change the way you think to change the way you drink.
That turn to curiosity is where we just get to ask the questions. We don't have to make a declaration on where we are or aren't or where we need to be. We don't have to make that declaration, but turning to curiosity, okay, God, what are you nudging me towards? Where am I harming myself? How am I harming myself? What does my relationship to alcohol look like? Is it in an unhealthy place? Is this pleasing to you the way that I do this? Is this helping me show up the way I want for myself and others? What are the habit loops around this that perpetuate it? Is this God's best for me the way
Yeah,
I,
that's
you
good.
know, yeah, like, I mean, I know for myself, like going to church hungover, I mean, more so towards the end of my drinking career, if you will, like that became a more regular thing. Rushing bedtime stories and prayers with the kids to get back downstairs to have another glass of wine or to, go sit outside with Todd and have another drink, keeping them up from past their bedtime at a friend's house in the basement so we could have one more drink, one more song, napping when I was hungover, like napping the next day. How many times did I go to church, come home, and then we would nap? Like, okay, we made it through church miserably, and then now we're going to nap for the rest of the afternoon instead of having family time or snapping at my kids and my husband. The low grade irritability that I had, which was low grade at times, but also high grade, as we talked about on our podcast. The mental real estate occupied by thinking about, planning for, prepping, recovering from, all of this was having massive impact on how I was showing up in my life. And the curiosity around like, is this God's intention for me to be living like
Mhm.
this? Is this God's best for me? And so it's about getting really curious about those things. And when you do, this is what's so cool. When you get curious, you get out of that emotional place where you can't see clearly and you just feel stuck with this. You get this clarity because you turn back to your smart lady brain and you're like, oh, okay, curious. Oh, okay. So I can just hold this. I can be an investigator in this. I can collect data around this. I don't have to make some declaration about this is whatever. And so if we're choosing condemnation over compassion, we're committing that self malpractice. And that's not going to lead to anything in the way of change. It's only going to keep us further stuck.
Yeah. So, so good. So, our tiny new action then for commandment 1 is just to give yourself so much grace and self compassion, come from a place of curiosity and an experimental mindset. If you're looking at whether or not you think your drinking is helping you contribute to your own demise or it is malpractice, and if you already know that it is, the Tina is still the same. Come from a place of grace, compassion, and curiosity, because as we'll probably talk about, I'm sure, really quickly here, is the shame really does keep you stuck and it doesn't allow you to move forward. It's a false negative thoughts. And as we're going to talk about, we know all of our thoughts are not true. And so, yeah, should we do commandment 2? All right. Commandment number 2. I must believe that feelings are not facts. They are chemical events in my brain.
Yeah, so good. This one for me is just the greatest discovery that our feelings actually are clues to things that we need, clues to things to pay attention to. And when I was stuck in the drinking cycle, I wasn't curious about what I was feeling. Everything was just kind of directed by what I was feeling without much thought to that. And so whether it was I've had a stressful day and now here I'm, popping open the bottle of wine because hello, I'm stressed and whatever, wasn't even conscious really of what I was feeling. And that's when the feelings can hijack you and take over, right? This is the opportunity that we have in this space where we're curious about what our relationship to alcohol looks like and making some change around it is we get to be curious about what our feelings are actually communicating to us. And they point us to oftentimes like things in our thinking that are not true or things that opportunities for exploration and getting to like, okay, am I really seeing this the right way? And furthering that into the conversation around like cravings, when we have a craving for alcohol, instead of just reacting to that feeling like I need this, I feel like I need this, or I feel like wine would make this better. I feel like it's our opportunity to pause and get curious about what it is telling us that we need. And that's something we talk a lot about when we coach through cravings.
Imagine stepping into a vibrant, warm community where faith, friendship, and freedom from alcohol all come together. That's exactly what you'll experience in the But Jesus Drank Wine community.
Each week, our members gather for connection calls that feel like a breath of fresh air, a time to share, grow, and support one another.
With an encouraging leadership team, a dedicated prayer request space, and connection opportunities in every time zone, you don't have to walk this journey alone.
Plus, we bring you masterclasses with expert guests, optional book clubs and Bible studies, and so much more.
And for those ready to go even deeper, we offer a small group coaching space called The Missing Piece. With weekly recorded coaching calls, it's a supportive place for women committed to breaking free from alcohol.
We're here to hold space for sober and sober-curious women who love Jesus or are eager to reconnect with him. Wherever you are on your path, you'll feel seen, supported, and strengthened here.
As one member described, quote, "The BJDW community is unique because there's a connection between faith and freedom from alcohol that I haven't been able to find in any other online space or through my church."
Ready to join the sisterhood? Head over to butjesusdrankwine.com/community or click the link in the show notes to learn more. We can't wait to meet you. Yeah, that's so good, babe. And when I read this commandment, I also felt like relief to me a lot.
Yes.
Because, and shout out to any perimenopausal or menopausal woman, or just women in general, like at any spot in your cycle, you will know that the rage or whatever emotion you have, the feeling that you have is not necessarily real or fact. And often, if you just sit with it, let the wave wash over you, that it is temporary and it is not actually the truth, right? And so just a shout out to any women that, and I'm sure there are some of them that are listening that get that. So for commandment 2, our tiny Tina is, and this is an exercise that is on day 2 of my 40-day fast book, which is figure out a feeling-based goal as opposed to a behavior-based goal. And actually, we're coaching through my book in our community for Lent. And so we're starting today, and this is what we're actually going to be coaching some of our gals today, is instead of focusing on behavior modification, and by that we mean to quit drinking, to drink less, to stop drinking, to drink 2 days a week, whatever it may be, those behavior-based goals often make us feel really crummy. They make us feel like we're already going to fail. They feel like there's no actual way to judge whether there's any sort of win or success there. It's very hard to tell if you're doing a good job at those goals unless you fully quit drinking on day 1. And that doesn't happen for a lot of us. And so what we like to do is concentrate on how do you want to feel? So get really curious about how you want to feel. Do you want to have more energy? Do you want to be more patient with your kids? Do you want to be more connected with your spouse? Do you want to feel closer to Jesus? This is the great thing about what we get to talk about in the community is like, if you're getting closer to Jesus, even by drinking a little bit less, it's a huge win, right? And so a feeling-based goal as opposed to a behavior modification goal. And if that sounds confusing, our DMs are open and we're happy to chat with you about it. But that is such a great way to move from, because when you set a goal based on how you want to feel, let's say you want to have more energy and you start drinking less and you feel like you're a little more energized, then you know that there is progress there, right? Like Mead always calls them pops, proof of progress. I love that so much. And so, yeah, that's our Tina for our second commandment. Okay, let's get after it. Commandment 3, I must believe that most of my automatic thoughts are untrue. I think this might be one of my favorite ones. What about you?
Oh my gosh. Who knew? They
So
were
good. So good.
untrue. 80% of them are untrue. And what's the stat? We have 68 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and the majority of them are untrue. It's just mind blowing, but it makes total sense. And when I was stuck in the drinking cycle, I had so many well-practiced thoughts I was in like the car of my life. I was the passenger and my thoughts were driving my car. They just showed up as true, unchecked. I didn't know that they were separate from me. I didn't know that I could think about my thinking, like the fancy word metacognition. We get to think about our thinking. We had no awareness for that, but they absolutely left unchecked. Thoughts will drive your life and not into a good place or a place of choice. And that's what I didn't realize. So getting curious about what are those stories that I'm telling myself about alcohol? What are those stories that I'm telling myself about myself? All the stories I'm telling myself about God. Turns out I had so many stories about God that were untrue. But when we believe them as true without checking them, our behaviors, our actions, the way we show up is drastically different. So I love, yeah, it's probably one of my favorite too.
Yeah. And so the title of our podcast is But Jesus Drank Wine and Other Stories That Kept Us Stuck, because this is what we really like to delve into on our podcast is all of these stories, all these false narratives, all these thoughts that like we decided were true, but then we figured out when we read the Bible and actually tried to live differently were actually total baloney. There is a chapter in my book, it's day 26, where I talk all about alcohol and how it affects our joy. And one of the thoughts that I had that I really truly believed was true, as much as the sky is blue, was that alcohol brought me joy and it was fun. And it was the last kind of reason, unmet need, job, whatever you want to call it, that I was giving alcohol, that I had to go and do a lot of work on this thought before I realized that was false. So if you want to start at one place with this commandment, it's just, again, be open and curious to maybe those thoughts that you're having aren't true about alcohol. Maybe, just maybe, it doesn't do the things that you're drinking it for. And we're not telling you to believe us. We never, ever are telling you that. We want you to try it for yourselves.
I'm just reflecting on my biggest thought that kept me stuck was the fact that I thought alcohol was necessary for connection.
Yeah.
And I thought it was necessary for connection with my husband. I thought it was necessary for connection to all of my friends. And yet at the same time, I didn't feel connected to God. And there was this conflict around that. And once I got curious about that and realized this was a story that was really driving it all, I got the experiential knowledge that said that actually alcohol drinking leads to disconnection. It doesn't lead to connection at all. That took some time to get there. But once that was challenged, I realized that I had it all backwards, and true connection, meaningful connection with my husband, with other people, and connection with the Lord, to the Lord in a real relationship with the Lord. For me, that was not possible as long as I believed that alcohol was the thing that was the connector or the bridge for those things, the thing that was necessary for connection. And it was also the thing that kept me stuck, being afraid to do anything about it when I was like, okay, maybe there is some conflict around my drinking here, but I don't know what to do about it because I'm going to lose my relationships. Turns out those relationships on this side of alcohol, those relationships are 1,000 times better, more connected, deeper. I didn't know that was possible. And then certainly, most importantly, the reconnection with God. But that's been the biggest of all, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. I love that so, so much. And I had all of those same thoughts too about connection. And I'll just echo everything you said. All of my relationships, the ones that I truly, truly care about, are so much better. We have a great podcast episode. I think it's episode, what is it? The 10 best things about never having to drink again. It's one of many episodes that we've recorded, but we talk all about the things that we didn't expect out of not drinking. And so, yeah, that was one that was so true for me. So for our Tina for Commandment 3, and this is actually Dr. Lee's thought biopsy, but I also have written it in the book as this tactic of awareness, story, truth. So first, become aware of the thought. It really, 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 really helps to write them down, especially if you're in a mind swirl. I was coaching a gal a couple days ago who she got home from work and she sent me a text and she said she just needed to end the day and she wanted to numb out all the things that had happened at work that day. And I said, let's become aware of the thoughts first. Like what actually happened today and what's in that mind swirl of yours. And so untangle all of those thoughts, become aware of it. In her case, a lot of the things that she was stressed about were story like that we talked about, story that she was making up that actually wasn't true. And therefore, when she actually thought about it and figured this out and brought these thoughts to truth, she felt so much better and less like drinking. And so become aware of it. And the second step is, what is the story? So what is true fact and what is your mind doing to fill in the blanks? Our brains are meaning making machines, and they love to tell us lies, as we've talked about. So figure out what is true. We talk about this all the time in our community. And then lastly, what is true? And the best part about this is, because we're Christians, we hold the truth in our hands, right? This is not, you don't have to find a self-help mantra. You don't have to do any other research apart from opening your Bible. We know what is true. And I think too, it's really important just to note here that God says so many wonderful things about us as women and as his children and as adopted members of him and his kingdom. And so if you are feeling like you want to drink to change your emotional state because you're not feeling great about yourself or how that day went or your momming skills or the way that you did work that day or whatever it is, there is a list. I think maybe you've shared it in the community before, this wonderful list that we always like to share of what God says about us. What does God say about you? And that can help shift that emotion. It can help you not want to numb out. So awareness, story, truth. It's a different way of saying Dr. Lee's thought biopsy, but just, yeah, so good. Okay. So self brain surgery commandment number 4 is, I must believe that my mind is in charge of my brain. Oh my gosh. I remember when Dr. Lee said that, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Yes, it is such a great way to understand that our brain is not running the show, that we actually have control over what is going on in there, right? It's just so, so good to think of those two things as separate, which sounds a little wild and wacky, your brain and your mind being different things. But if you start to think of them as your mind being the control center and your brain is just literally spitting all these, as you said, 80,000 thoughts a day, the most of which are negative and most of which are untrue, and that your mind is the control center over these. And I think when we're talking about this in relation to our drinking, right? This is where you start to hear that wine witch voice, right? One of the tactics that we love to talk about is name your craving voice, name your wine witch. And I was actually just helping with a client with this exact same thing the other day, where she gets home from a long day and the wine witch is telling her all of these things, that how the alcohol, how the wine is going to help her. It's going to relax her. It's her reward for a long day of working and then dealing with the kids after school and all of these things, right? But the truth of it is that voice has a one-track mind. And that one-track mind is to get you to have that wine. It doesn't care about your next morning, and didn't care about
Satan.
Yes, exactly.
Satan.
Yeah.
His name is Satan.
Yeah.
Which voice is named Satan?
Totally. Yeah. And that voice, Satan, right? He obviously does not care about next morning Christy at all whatsoever. And so I think that can be a really, really helpful tool for women and men, where when you start hearing that voice and the voice is telling you you need a drink, you are actually in control of that voice. You are separate from that voice. And that voice is the voice of habit. It's a well-trodden neural pathway in your brain that you have created over decades of drinking, or I'll just speak for myself, decades and decades of myself drinking. And so when I really stopped and I thought about what that voice was and who she was and what she was saying, and realized I was in charge of her and that I cared about tomorrow, Christy, and we're going to talk about that in another commandment, but that was a game changer for me.
Yeah, because the brain is just responding to what we're telling ourselves, what we're saying, what our mind is focused on. And what we are paying attention to becomes what we become. Like, so what we're paying attention to, what comes in through our mind, our brain responds to it. And it's that automatic neural pathway, like you said, that becomes so conditioned, so practiced, puts it in a habit loop. And so if we're not separating, we're not finding space between what we're thinking and then the response to that thinking. That's the great thing about doing this work, is that once you start getting curious about those voices, the things that you're hearing, the thoughts that you believe are true, the stories that you're telling yourself, once you start paying attention to that, you can put this space in between the story and the actual response. Whereas if it's going unchecked, your brain is just responding to whatever your mind is inputting. And so if we're focused on all of this information, so to speak, all of this data shows me that like wine is necessary for all of these things. And I'm paying attention to that. And my mind is taking that in. My brain is going to respond in an automatic fashion to that. Well practice. It's conditioned to do that. But getting really curious, stopping and pausing and thinking about what is that voice? And by the way, is that voice of God? Is that the same? No, like the voice of God is not going to beat us up and shame us and take us into a direction that's harmful for us. And so getting really curious about that and pausing to pay attention to how your mind is then causing your brain to react in an automatic way. It's not true that hitting the easy button of wine is going to help me with my anxiety right now. I know that now because I've gotten curious about it. I've explored that. I've called that out as not true. But for so long, I did believe that. It was my brain's automatic response to what my mind was telling me that alcohol, wine helps me relax. It actually was increasing my anxiety. It was actually like throwing gasoline on the fire. So it seems so simple, but this is the thing too. It seems so simple and so obvious. And yet it was so not simple or obvious to me when I first realized that my mind is in charge of everything. And I think that's why, like our community, our podcast, we're rooted in Romans 12 too. Like, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Everything that comes in through our mind, it's influencing what happens next. And it can happen automatically without our intention and not to good, or we can take control over that by paying attention to what those things are and then directing our attention towards Philippians 4:8, what is true, what is noble, thinking about those things. That's going to create a different outcome for us than when we have that wine voice that's telling us like, hey, you need this to relax tonight.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm so glad you brought up Romans 12 too, because when you were talking before, I was like, that definitely plays in here big because it's really hard, I think, to see your mind and your brain as separate things when the world is so noisy. And
Yes.
the world is, if we go to talk about confirmation bias, right? If I say, I'm thinking to myself that alcohol is helping me relax, then I open up Instagram and every single other mom is telling me that that's what they're doing as a reward and a relaxing treat at the end of the day, then that's going to foster me believing that that false thing is true. And so it's so, so important to be wary of the world and its messaging. And again, become aware of it, become curious of it, and ask ourselves how it's aiding and forming our own thoughts and beliefs, right? It's our tiny Tina for this guy.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things that helped me when I was starting my journey is like to find that space between like my thoughts and then the response, what my brain would do in response to that, like actions, so to speak, was to I started a practice of like stillness. You were talking about like the mind, it's so noisy. We have all of these thoughts swirling. And when we're not paying attention to them, when we don't know that they're separate from our brains and we don't know that we can actually take them captive and do something about them because they're not true, it just becomes really cluttered and noisy in our heads. And something that was really, really helpful to me was to turn down the noise by starting just a simple 5-minute practice. Every single morning, I would get in my car on the way to work, and instead of turning on music, instead of calling a friend, instead of listening to whatever, I drove in silence for the first 5 minutes, which was something that I was never silent. There was never any silence in my world. And just starting that gave me the ability to become aware of what my thoughts were and put distance between just the automatic response that I would have. The easy button. It's the easy button. It's, oh, this is happening. Oh, wine's good for that. Let's go over here. Like wine's good for that. It just happened so automatically. But when I could sit in silence and stillness and take in what was happening around me as I'm driving, start talking to God, that is when I was able to create this new way of paying attention to how my mind was controlling my brain. If I wanted different results, if I wanted different outcomes in my life, then it had to start with the thinking, had to start with changing that before I changed anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would encourage starting from that place. Like, do you have a practice of silence, of stillness, of you being bombarded by the noise of the world and not finding separation from that?
Yeah, I love that so much, babe. One of the ways that we often open up our community connection calls is with that Psalm 46:10 diminishing prayer. And I love it when you do that over our community. It's just such a great opportunity. And I've actually been inspired by you too, with trying to add more quiet into my life so that my thoughts, I can figure out what's my mind and what's my brain. And my word for 2025, as you know, has been quiet. And when I said that to our community leadership team, I got this verse back and I love it so much. 1 Peter 3:4. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. And so, yeah, get quiet, be still.
Yeah, that's what. So I started with that 5 minutes a day, just the silence. And then I found that be still and know, diminishing prayer. And then it's added onto that and read a minute. There is, again, where we're like talking about the truth is there in the word, in scripture, in the Bible. Like it's right there for us. There's a reason why that stillness is so important, because that's where we meet God. That's where we're with God. That's where he can do what God could do. And I think that's something that's so tiny and I often forget that was so pivotal in my journey, but it certainly was.
Yeah, that's so good, babe. Number 5. Okay. I must believe that self brain surgery is not a metaphor. It is a mechanism for transforming my life.
I love. I remember exactly when Dr. Lee said this on our podcast. And I was like, yes, that is the perfect way of describing how impactful this work is. When you're thinking about your thinking, when you're changing your thinking to change your drinking, to change your life, it's not a metaphor. And the way that he talked about it, the way that it actually is changing the structure in your brain, like that has been, I think, the most incredible surprise gift of starting doing this work, finding freedom from alcohol, is that like when I can change my thinking, when I can disrupt those automatic neural pathways that I have, that the automatic ways of thinking that show up as truth in my life, when I can disrupt that and start practicing thinking different ways and from a place of truth, right? Without the cloudiness of what I just believed for so long was true that wasn't, everything changes. And it's not the toxic positivity kind of like new agey, like just think better thoughts. Yes, we're thinking better thoughts, but we're thinking through thoughts. They're better true thoughts.
Yeah, and we have the
Lives.
truth. Yeah, and that's the thing. We have the truth. Sorry, go ahead. I just got really.
No, go.
No, I was just saying, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just think that's what the difference is between doing this in a self-help way or having this be some sort of like self-help mantra is we have the truth. This mechanism is the truth. This mechanism is spelled out in 2 Corinthians 10:5. It is there. And Philippians 4:8. This is how we change our mind to change our life. It's not just a self-helpy mantra. And I think you and I met in the world of self-help, getting certified as sobriety coaches. We have so many women that have come to us after being in the self-help world and being the new age. And I will say that what has resonated with me when I was in that space of reading all the self-help, the things that changed me and helped me the most were the things that we're talking about here, right? It is this take your thought captive. It is change your mind to change your life. And there's a lot of gurus, authors that have taken this and put their own spin on it. It's been corrupted by the new age. Like we just did an episode on that on the podcast with an amazing psychotherapist. And
Yeah, it's not just like the trendy thing to do. It is biblical. We are renewing our minds to be transformed. Transformation comes when we renew our minds, when we disrupt those old neural pathways that say this is the way we do things. And from commandment 4, like the mind is directing the brain. So like you back it up to that and you see that like it affects everything. Transformation comes from getting really curious. It all comes back to that. I know that we say that a lot. It's something that we are just constantly saying on our podcast too, but it is so true. Like when we're turning curiosity, I can't just adopt a belief as true. Like I'm a questioner. That's just my personality type. And so I've got to be able to look at the truth and see it and then gather the data around it, collect this information, experiential knowledge that says that, oh my gosh, like actually this is true. It's not just a metaphor. It is actually, it changes your brain.
Yeah.
Changes your life. which is
This
amazing.
is also one of the reasons that if you happen to be a community member of ours, you have heard me say this a million times, but this is why I think it is so cool that we had this struggle with alcohol. Because when you're talking about taking your thoughts captive and you're talking about becoming aware of them, figuring out what is story and figuring out what is true, when you're doing this self brain surgery, when you're doing this thought biopsy, when you're doing this work, it's pretty straightforward when you're talking about a wine craving, right? We've already given you a few examples of that, right? It's like my mind is telling me that alcohol is helping me relax. Is this story? Is this true? And then you get to go and, well, there's so much information, everywhere now talking about telling us how alcohol affects cortisol. We won't go there, but it's totally false. But like you just said, it's the experiential knowledge, right? It's the cellular knowing, it's the going and figuring out in your own lived experience that thing, that belief that you held as true is actually false. And I really truly believe that if you are a woman struggling with an alcohol battle, you get to use this mechanism in a really straightforward way when it comes to looking at what your wine cravings are saying and figuring out what is true or not. And then you get to, right? Like we always talk about this. It's not a have to, it's a get to. You're invited, not required. And you then get to take this knowledge that you learn about this mechanism and how it transformed your relationship with alcohol and have it transform the rest of your life, right? Like, I'll just say it one more time. If you're a woman struggling with alcohol, you get to use this mechanism in a really straightforward way. And then it helps your life. It helps you in every other aspect of your life.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I thought if I could find the missing piece to my puzzle, that I was stuck in this, I had this life that looked great on the outside. And by all accounts, it was a good life, but I felt so much internal conflict and tension. And I was really, I think, just secretly miserable. And I couldn't figure out why. And so then, like, when I finally looked at how alcohol was maybe playing a part in this, and maybe I needed to, but I stayed stuck. So I'm like, I don't look like a traditional like rock bottom drinker. If I could have found freedom from alcohol, that would have been enough. That I was trying to find the missing piece to this puzzle of how can I not miserably try every single day for the rest of my life not to drink, because that sounded really hard. But also, I don't want to stay stuck miserably drinking either. How can I do this and actually change my desire for this? And that was a huge wake up for me when I realized it wasn't about not doing the behavior. I wanted to change my desire for wine so that not drinking was effortless, because that's what true freedom would have felt like. And so when I did find freedom from alcohol by changing my thinking to change my drinking first, I thought, okay, this is it. Now I can just like ride off into the sunset. My life is going to be so much better. And it is. And it was. But I had no idea that it was
Just the beginning. It was just the beginning.
yeah, the dress rehearsal, if you will, for this greater story that the Lord was trying to write with me for my life, that started by paying attention to my thinking, and everything that I learned to find freedom from alcohol has been able to be applied into everything else. Stories. I mean, it's a thing. It's like all comes back to the stories that we're telling ourselves. And once we can become aware of what those are and be curious about them and find the truth, find the actual truth about them, not just take it as truth, like find the truth, everything changes and everything gets so much better. That's what I wasn't prepared for. I didn't know that, but also because I didn't realize the missing piece. I was looking for peace and joy. Like I didn't feel that. I felt the tension and stress and all of this when I was stuck in a drinking cycle. The missing piece to the equation for me and so many others is Jesus. When we're trying to just do it with our mind, but we're not bringing in the creator of our mind and allowing him to guide us and lead us and transforming our minds, renewing our minds on truth, then we're missing a really big part of it. And yeah, that's why we're so passionate about the work that we do and why we named our things the missing piece, PEACE. It's not a thing, it's a person. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for the tiny Tina for this one, I would say just be open to continuing to study this mechanism. Keep listening to Dr. Lee's podcasts. Get on his list for his self brain surgery school. If you're a woman and you are struggling with alcohol and you want to know about how this mechanism can transform the way that you're drinking, transform your mind, transform your life, come hang out with us on our podcast or in our community or grab my book. just learn more about this mechanism because it will literally change your life like it's changed our lives.
It's so not a metaphor. I love it. When he said that on our podcast, I was thinking, yes, that's it. So good.
Okay, thanks for listening, friends. We will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. You can find all of our episodes at butjesusdrinkwine.com and be sure to follow us over on Instagram, Love Life Sober, and I'm Not Sober, I'm Free.
To learn more about what we do, you can visit our websites, meethollandshirley.com and lovelifesober.com.
Take a screenshot of this podcast and share it with a friend or two.
And don't forget to subscribe to our pod so you don't have to worry about missing a single episode. And if you love what we're doing, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify.
This helps more women who are feeling stuck and alone in the overdrinking cycle find hope and encouragement.
Thanks, ladies. We so appreciate you, and we'll see you next Monday.